Greetings, my wonderful students. Today we begin our study of Jacksonian democracy. New parties emerge. The only major political party in the United States from 1816 to 1824 was the Democratic Republicans, because the Federalist Party, you recall, had collapsed after the end of the War of 1812. The Democratic Republicans, however, was divided, which created problems in the 1824 election. Party leaders chose William Crawford to be their candidate for president, but three other candidates in the party received backing from their home states, and they reflected the interest of their regions. Andrew Jackson was from Tennessee and claimed to speak for the common American. Henry Clay from Kentucky was Speaker of the House. And John Quincy Adams from Massachusetts, who was the son of former President John Adams, was supported by the merchants of the Northeast. Now, Jackson received a plurality of the popular vote, meaning he had more votes for him than any other candidate had, but he only had 40% of the votes. With 100% divided amongst four different candidates, it was very easy for a person to not win more than 50% of the vote. And because he didn't have more than 50% of the vote, he did not receive a majority of the electoral vote. No candidate did. And the Constitution says that the House of Representatives chooses the president when no candidate wins a majority of the electoral vote. So, Henry Clay met with John Quincy Adams and agreed to use his influence to defeat Jackson. Then the House, with Clay's help, chose Adams for the presidency, and Adams named Henry Clay as Secretary of State. Jackson and his followers accused the men of making a corrupt bargain and stealing the election, because Adams actually had less votes than Jackson did, but he became the president. Now, while no evidence was ever discovered, a cloud was cast over Adams' presidency, and President Adams asked Congress for money to improve roads and waterways and build a national university and fund scientific research. Adams' opponents felt that the role of the national government should be more limited, and the spending on such projects was wrong. They felt it should be done at the state level. Congress did approve funds for improving rivers, harbors, and roads, but much less than Adams had wanted. Now, by 1828, Democratic Republicans had split into the Democrats and the National Republicans. Democrats had favored states' rights and distrusted national power, and they supported Andrew Jackson for president. The National Republicans wanted a strong national government that spent on infrastructure improvements, and they supported John Adams. Both sides used mudslinging, which is gossip and lies, and rallies and slogans and campaign buttons to win the election. Jackson won the election easily with support from the West and the South, both of which supported states' rights. Now, originally only men who owned property or paid taxes could vote. By the 1820s, however, many states had loosened those restrictions, and more people had the capability of voting. By 1828, most states let voters choose the presidential electors instead of the state legislatures. All of these would allow Jackson to be swept into power as the person who represented the common man. However, women, African Americans, and Native Americans still had few rights. Democrats were upset that the federal government had become a bureaucracy, a system in which non-elected officials carried out laws. After Jackson took office, he fired many federal workers, and he replaced them with his supporters. The fired workers protested and said Jackson was acting like a tyrant. Jackson's supporters said that since Jackson won, his supporters had the right to the spoils or benefits of victory. This practice of replacing government employees with the supporters of the winner became known as the spoils system, was a common feature in the American election system. Jackson's supporters got rid of the caucus system of choosing candidates for office in their party, and they replaced it with a nominating convention, where delegates from each state would choose the party's presidential candidate. These conventions allowed more people to participate in the process and made the system of electing the president more democratic, more people having a voice. The tariff debate. Now, a tariff is a tax on imported goods. The high tariff on British goods helped the northeastern factory owners. It made the British goods more expensive and encouraged Americans to buy American-made goods. Now, the Southerners disliked this tariff because they paid higher prices for goods that they bought from Europe, And Southerners feared that the tariffs might hurt trade with Europe because they were afraid that Europe would put tariffs on the Southern cotton that was being traded into Europe. In 1828, Congress passed a high tariff law, called the Tariff of Abominations by its critics, and the Vice President, Calhoun, claimed that the states had the right to nullify federal laws that violated state interests, to declare them unconstitutional. Jackson strongly disagreed with this idea, believing that nullification would destroy the Union, the United States. Congress passed a bill that provided federal money for building a road in Kentucky. Because the road was only in Kentucky, Jackson vetoed the funding, stating Kentucky should build it. In 1832, they lowered the tariff, but that was not enough for the South. South Carolina passed the Nullification Act, stating it would not pay illegal tariffs, and the state threatened to secede or leave the United States. Jackson had Congress pass the Force Bill, which allowed him to use the military to enforce federal law. South Carolina accepted the tariff after that, but then they nullified the Force Bill. And that